Yesterday, we tackled our top 55 overall startup rankings. Today, we are tackling just the foundational assets. The definition of that being 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025 NFL draft picks. Ergo, these guys are all on their rookie contracts still, and they're all generally about 25 or younger. And these guys will be the foundation of your dynasty team. If you guys are going into a deep rebuild, you're trying to retool your team, these are players you feel comfortable holding through a 1 year, retool or a 2 year rebuild potentially. Anybody older than this, we're probably thinking are more competitive type of assets.
Yeah, for sure. At the end of the day, these are guys I'd be comfortable, like you said, holding in a rebuild. They're all valued in their early 20s. They're guys that if you are in your startups today are going to be the hottest commodities.
For sure. And we will tackle the top 45, top 50 or so contending type of assets. So that'll be like the Chase, the Jeffersons, the St. Browns, those type of guys. We just don't have them included here because these are more for rebuilding teams and teams that are going through a retool and things of that nature. So we have about 45 names to talk about here. So let's get right into it. The first guy in a tier of his own, because the other two guys he's in a tier with in startups are older quarterbacks, is Jayden Daniels, who, of course, had a monster season, 21.5 points per game, was the second overall pick in the NFL draft, and is now entering just his second season, runs the football, has a decent supporting cast around him. Terry McLaurin, Debo, a little bit older, but hopefully they're able to replenish assets and replenish young players around him in the short term. But Jayden Daniels, I mean, if you are entering a rebuild, you have no concerns that this guy's fallen off from a talent or a value standpoint anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, we saw what he was able to do as a rookie, the offensive rookie of the year, a guy that literally led the Washington Commanders to the NFC Championship in year one. Obviously, from a fantasy perspective, he runs. He's got a very good weapons core now. Obviously, they add Debo Samuel in addition to already having Terry McLaurin. Maybe we see even more improvements in terms of the offensive line play. I mean, he's just such a safe asset. Like Allen, like Lamar, he really is at no risk. Like if we did the ACL test on him tomorrow, okay, God forbid, obviously, hopefully we're hoping for health. But Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Jayden Daniels would lose next to no value, even if they got hurt.
Yeah, exactly. The ACL test is pretty good, especially for quarterbacks. We can move down to the next tier of players, which is 3+ first rounders kind of territory. Again, these are very young players, two of them quarterbacks who obviously hold value long term. But Malik Neighbors, Brock Bowers, Caleb Williams, and Drake Maye, all players from the 2024 NFL draft who are very young and showed a lot of promise. And specifically in Caleb and Drake's situation, we are projecting a lot of great things going forward. Malik Neighbors, I mean, the reception perception numbers just came out for a lot of the 2024 wide receivers, and he was 80th percentile against man and press coverage, 62nd percentile against zone coverage. The dude had a monster 35% target share as a rookie and got a quarterback upgrade, presumably in both Russell Wilson and in Jackson Dart, who they drafted near the end of the first round. Not much to say about Malik Neighbors. If you are entering a 2 to 3 year rebuild, Malik Neighbors will barely be 24 by the time you're done.
Yeah, I mean, it's simple. The target volume that he saw in year one, we're hoping Jackson Dart can be a plus at quarterback, but even if he's not a big, significant needle mover, you're comparing that to Daniel Jones, you're comparing that to Drew Lock last year, you're getting an inherent quarterback upgrade, whether it's a Jackson Dart, whether it's a Russell Wilson at the starting quarterback spot. We saw what we need to see. We know he's an elite level alpha. He's proven that he's on a superstar level trajectory. And he's a guy that if you wanted the value in that Lamb, Jefferson, Chase tier at the top of dynasty rankings, I think at the very minimum, he's a clear top 4 player.
Absolutely. And Bowers is no different. I mean, you don't get 21-year-old tight ends post the third most targets basically in the last, what was it, 20 years or something like that, or history of the NFL in a single season. Again, 17-game season aside. Brock Bowers had a monster rookie season. It's really, really hard to do what he did. Think about all the great prospects we've seen come out of college, TJ Hawkinson, Kyle Pitts, all these guys. They didn't produce year one like Brock Bowers did. He took what Sam LaPorta did and he turned it up to 11 and dunked on Sam LaPorta. As great as Sam LaPorta's rookie season was, Brock Bowers was even better than that. Again, 2 to 3 year rebuild, no problem. Brock Bowers is going to be 24 years old, just entering his prime. And in the short term, he got a quarterback upgrade this offseason with Geno Smith. They add Ashton Genty and Jack Bech to the offense to give it a little bit more juice. This is going to be a really, really good asset long term. 3+ first rounders in heavy tight end premium formats is probably too low in terms of what Brock Bowers is actually worth.
Yeah, I mean, I'm plugging it in right now just to give you guys a reference. So I'm trying to figure out how to sort by targets per game on StatMuse, but regardless, I talked about this in the last video, but 153 targets is 4th all time at the tight end position. It's just what Brock Bowers did as a rookie. The only tight end seasons to out target him, like I mentioned in the last video, Zach Ertz 2018, Tony Gonzalez in 2007 and 2008. Yeah, sure, a couple of those were 16-game sample sizes, but even when you compare that, he had more, the same amount as Mark Andrews did in 2021. He had more than Travis Kelce did in that record-breaking 2022. He is on a trajectory to not only be a gold jacket player, but a first ballot. He won't be waiting.
Yeah, no, exactly. He's been outstanding. And the fact that all those guys you mentioned those seasons were veteran tight ends at the time, it just shows you that this doesn't happen at the rookie tight end position. You just don't see guys produce like this. He was the whole offense, and he will continue to be, probably him and Genty, the two guys that they center this offense around. Going forward, again, we made the very long cases for Caleb Williams and Drake Maye in the last video, so we can give the shortened version.
A lot of comments on it too.
A lot of comments. A lot of people disagreeing with Danny specifically for having him over Mahomes, having them over Burrow. But in a rebuild, from the context of a rebuilding team, the only real thing you'd have to worry about with both Caleb Williams and Drake Maye is that they're not the talent level of quarterbacks that we think they are. That's pretty much the only concern that you have. But offensively, both teams build around Caleb Williams with DJ Moore, Luther Burden, Rome Odunze, Colston Loveland, Ben Johnson coming in as the offensive coordinator and head coach. Drake Maye added Kyle Williams, added Will Campbell, added Morgan Moses to the right tackle position, added positional coaching that upgrades that they have with Mike Vrabel, Josh McDaniels coming in. Both of these guys are on the up and up. Caleb Williams pointing rookie season relative to Drake Maye. Drake Maye obviously very productive his rookie year, but both of these guys were rushing the football quite a bit and give you a little bit of upside from that perspective. But in the context of a rebuild, both of these guys can ascend to top 10 dynasty assets very, very quickly into their second seasons.
Yeah, and you mentioned talent level. I don't think talent is the word for it, because I would argue that these guys actually, from a talent ceiling perspective, have two of the highest ceilings in the league. But in terms of proven production, they're not there yet, like you said. However, if they do get there this year, they're going to be in that Daniels tier. And in fact, you can make the case that, I mean, if Drake Maye goes out there and he has 25 touchdowns and 10 interceptions and he rushes for 700 yards, Caleb Williams goes out there in year 2 and he has 30-plus touchdown passes, is attached to Ben Johnson, and we see the upside from those weapons, I think it's almost a foregone conclusion that they will be top 5 picks in that scenario.
Yeah, they'll probably make that tier of 1 a tier of 3, realistically. And who knows, depending on what Daniels does, like, it wouldn't be shocking. Both of us preferred Caleb Williams and Drake Maye before the NFL draft in 2024. If Jaden has a down sophomore year and these guys take big steps, wouldn't be shocking if the market flips on some of these guys. However, Jaden Daniels runs so much that from a fantasy perspective, it would be difficult for them to overcome what Jaden Daniels has already done and would continue to do.
Yeah, and I know Young Money, if you're watching this, we got to give Jaden his flowers too. Yes, he is the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. But all these guys, you're holding through a rebuild, no problem. Moving down to the next tier, we have, again, the parameters for this video is 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025 NFL draft picks. Ergo, they're on their rookie contract still. That's why they're foundational assets. Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, because their running backs are more competitive, I would say, than a 23-year-old wide receiver would be, because they're 23-year-old running backs. But they're both top 5 redraft picks. They're both excellent, excellent running backs who are going to be very fantasy relevant even for the next 3, 4, 5 calendar years, because they are so young and so productive already. With both of these guys, I'm comfortable holding them through more of a retool than a long-term like orphan rebuild situation. Like, if you took over an orphan and it had Bijan on it and nothing else, you're probably selling Bijan for a boatload of draft picks to try and rebuild the whole totality of your team. But if you just need to retool for a year or whatever, I'm totally fine holding these guys. They're not old. Even they're going to give you great production on the field. You can still count on Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan to be top 5 dynasty running backs this time next year and probably the year after that.
Yeah, they're locked and loaded. They're still in the prime of their careers. They're still attached to very good situations, very, very good workloads. Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs, the explosive ability, attachment to that Lions offense. Yes, you're losing Ben Johnson, but however, we do still expect him to be a legitimate 20, 22-plus point per game running back, just how explosive that offense projects to be. And then with Bijan Robinson, I mean, the workload, obviously, the run scheme fits him last year. We saw the offensive line play well. We saw him legitimately be a guy that was putting up, it felt like every single game box score, he was at 20 fantasy points per game. And down the stretch, like the last 8 games, did he not cross 20 points in any one of them?
No, he was dominant. Like, it's pretty hard to replicate what both of these guys can give you from a production standpoint. And again, from a value retention standpoint, because we know they're going to be top first round redraft picks for the next couple of years, they are going to hold their value regardless of them being running backs and entering that time where their teams are going to have to start to think about extending them.
Yeah, sorry. I'm trying to find the stat right now. If I go to Bijan Robinson and I search by his game logs and just kind of see what his point per game production PPR was, he had 2 games in his final 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2 of his last 12 games where he failed to cross 20 PPR points.
Yeah, and 20 PPR points on any given week is like a top 6 running back that week, usually, and probably higher on some weeks.
That's actually freakish production, by the way.
Dude, this is why. So people commented in the last video, how do you not have Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs over the quarterbacks? And I do in my startup rankings. Danny is the one bringing up the quarterbacks, obviously. And again, in a rebuild, the context of a rebuild, you probably do value young quarterbacks over competitive running backs. But in a, all things being equal startup situation, I would take these running backs over the quarterbacks.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't personally. Again, I just view the value difference. Like if Caleb and Drake hit, which I'm very confident they are. I think that's also the discrepancy is people are saying, well, 50-50 either way. They either hit or they don't. That's a 50 chance. Like, no, I think it's much more likely for both of them that they are leaning to hit, which is why I'm willing to aggressively rank them. If I did think it was a 50-50 outcome, then I would have them probably comparable to where the experts do on the site. So I'm fully confident on those quarterbacks. If you wanted to take the running backs, again, they are legit difference-making players. Like, I'm not going to argue against that. It's just the value of the quarterback position and the value of reaching the top of the market at the quarterback position comparatively to where I am at running back. On top of that, as good as they are, I think Ashton Jeanty is on their tier level of talent, and I'm getting a little bit of a reroll there with Ashton Jeanty being a couple years younger.
Yeah, we can talk about Jeanty, obviously, because if you're in a long-term rebuild, even in an orphan situation, because this would apply. If you took over an orphan and it had the 101, you presumably took Ashton Jeanty with that selection.
Yep.
And you would be comfortable holding Ashton Jeanty through a 2 to 3 year rebuild. Yes, would it be ideal if somebody gave you a Godfather offer for the 101? Yeah, but that doesn't always exist. Like people always say, oh, I remember a couple years ago when Caleb Williams was going to be the 101, people would say, oh, just get 5 first-round picks for him. It's like, well, there's probably 1 to 2 teams max in your league that has that kind of capital.
Yeah, realistically, like 5, I think when people say that, they mean like, oh, 5 firsts of equatable value. And people are like, oh, yeah, that's exactly first-round picks. Like, it would probably be something along the lines of a player worth 2 or 3 plus extra picks on top. But like you said, it's hard to just get the exact value in picks unless you're relating players to picks.
Yeah, because I sold last year in our listener dyno, I sold Marvin Harrison at 102 because I was a long-term rebuild. I sold it for Nico Collins 106, which I took Rome Odunze, I believe, or 107. I took Rome Odunze. And then I think I got like an early second or something like that on top of those players. So it's currency in terms of players sometimes. But regardless, Jeanty, I'd be comfortable holding him through a rebuild. He's going to have 300 to 400 projectable touches for the next calendar couple of years. I would say 5-6 years while he's with the Las Vegas Raiders. Short-term quarterback upgrade with Geno Smith. Brock Bowers, an excellent player in his own right. He's going to help move the offense. Jacoby Myers and Jack Besh, the same thing. I think you could make the argument pretty quickly that Jeanty is going to ascend to the Dynasty RB1. In fact, you already have him ranked there. I just prefer what Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs have already proven in the NFL on the 2% chance that Jeanty's not nearly as good as those guys. That's basically why I'm valuing them a little bit higher.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. Again, that is, like I mentioned, more optimistic with Jeanty because if you want to take the proven stud assets in the prime of their career, like, no, I'm not going to bark and say, yeah, no, Jeanty has to be number 1. Like, I think it's a pretty fluid tier of 3. Depends on your flavor.
Yep. And then Puka Nacua and Brian Thomas Jr., again, both under the age of 24 at wide receiver. Brian Thomas in last year's draft class, Puka Nacua 2 years ago's draft class. You can hold these guys through, again, more of a, long-term rebuild because they're wide receivers. Because worst case scenario, let's say you had to rebuild a team for 2.5 years or something in Dynasty. You have Puka Nacua, who's 24 years old, and he's 26.5 years old by the time you're done your rebuild. You're probably not ecstatic that you wasted some of his prime years, but at the same time, it's not going to kill you to hold a player like this. So again, that's the focus of this video. What assets are foundational? What ones would we hold through a rebuild? What ones are we building the rest of our team around? Also, for the word foundation of a house is what you build the rest of the house on. Puka Nacua and Brian Thomas Jr. definitely fit the bill for that.
Yeah, I mean, they're studs. Puka Nacua, 23 years old. Brian Thomas, 22 years old. Brian Thomas Jr., for what it's worth, if Travis Hunter was not drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars, would very comfortably be in the tier above for me. But because Travis Hunter's there, I think you do have to factor that in a little bit. Am I going to let it overwhelm and say, oh, yeah, no, Brian Thomas is going to lose a ton of value? No, because I still think for the most part, the 70th, 80th, even upwards of the 85th, 90th percentile outcome for BTJ still exists. It's just the 100th percentile outcome where, oh, he's 185 targets. He's Julio Jones 2.0 because he is the clear number one in his offense. Maybe that's not in the cards anymore. But if you told me there was a season where BTJ, and we'll talk about Hunter in a little bit, combined for like 2,900 receiving yards, wouldn't be shocked. And in fact, that might be my expectation even 2 to 3 years in their NFL careers.
Yeah, absolutely. So we could probably move down to the next tier because we feel quite good about these guys. We have Bo Nix, Drake London, Travis Hunter, CJ Stroud, and Marvin Harrison, Devon Achane, and Omarion Hampton. Again, when we talk about running backs, we'll talk about it in a little bit with those guys. We don't love holding running backs through rebuilds, but Achane specifically is kind of right on the fringe of the type of running back you would be okay holding through a retool. Let's talk about Bo Nix and CJ Stroud first, just because they're quarterbacks. Again, Bo Nix, even though he was a rookie last year, is already over 25 years old, barely. He's narrowly over 25 years old, but he was a rookie last year. The team, obviously, Denver has a lot of team control. They're probably going to address the wide receiver position, I would imagine, in like the first round in next year's class, and they probably would have this year if Emeka, Egbuka didn't go one pick before them. But Bo Nix, top 10 quarterback finisher last year, and very raw still, very young still, a lot of moldable ability for Sean Payton. He's pretty obvious why you'd want to hold him through a rebuild because he's a young quarterback. Same goes for CJ Stroud. Didn't have a great rookie year, or didn't have a great sophomore year, had a great rookie year. We feel comfortable in the additions that they've made. Jaden Higgins, Jalen Knoll. They lose their left tackle, Laramie Tunsil, but they're trying to rebuild that offensive line on the fly. We'll see how it goes. I actually think, just speaking in terms of what you want in a rebuild, sometimes you don't want hyper productive young assets because they can reduce the value of your rookie pick, right? If you're rebuilding and you're trying to get the 101 in 2026, sometimes having a guy like Bo Nix, who even though he's a young quarterback is going to produce a lot, is not as good as maybe say having CJ Stroud, who produces 17 points per game this year because his offensive line's undergoing some shifts.
Yeah, I guess it's contextually what matters. Like if you're in a retooling situation, that's one thing. If you're in a hard-on rebuild, like quite frankly, if Bo Nix is giving you top 8, top 9 level production, like he's going to be 26 after the year. Maybe you see what you can maximize his market value to be because he isn't a market high. He's valued as a top 10 level quarterback. Realistically, even though he's a young asset, how much higher at the quarterback position do you think Bo Nix can reach on the market? Because I think maybe this isn't his ceiling, but it's damn near close to 90 to 95% of his ceiling.
Yeah, I think if he had another great season this year and was like QB6 in points per game, he would probably establish himself as a top 6 to 7 dynasty quarterback, probably. Yeah. But it's not much higher than he's going now. And that would also depend on what the other guys do, Caleb and Drake and those type of guys. So, I don't totally disagree with you when I say like, hey, in a rebuild, in a long-term productive struggle, when players hit their market ceiling or get close to their market ceiling, if you can cash out for 3 first-round picks, you could probably do that on Bo Nix, especially considering you probably spent the 112 or the 202 or something on him.
Let me ask you this question. We'll just say for E's sake, it's mid-projected picks for the purpose of this video. Somebody knocks down on your doorstep, says, hey, listen, they're not going to say I'm a mid-projected team, but I'm willing to offer you the 202 on the clock this year, which is Jackson Dart plus my 26 and 27-1 for Bo Nix. You taking that?
That's probably enough that I would really consider it, especially, again, in a team situation in which I'm really tearing it down. Like I have no hope of competing this year or next year, probably 2027 after the rookie draft is maybe the first time I'm looking at my team being in like a house money contender situation. I would definitely consider doing something like that. Would I want to necessarily take Jackson Dart? Maybe not. I could just use that pick on, Luther Burden or something in that situation. But yeah, I think that's probably enough for me to consider moving off of Bo Nix. Especially if I evaluate the team and I look and they're like, they're not a real contender. They're probably going to be a mid pick or something like that.
What would the line need to be for you? Would you do it with Milroe or would you have to have Dart?
No, I would need at least 2 firsts and a high second round pick to consider trading Bo Nix, which is what you just outlined.
Yeah. I was just kind of giving the example for anybody that's watching that maybe has Nix or have been looking at Nix. Like that's what we mean when we see 2+ first rounders. We're equating a normal one at about a mid-future pick, 2026, 2027 on. And the plus would probably be around the equivalent of a mid-second. Because if it was a third round equivalent of the plus, like that's not relevant enough to actually make a needle moving type of deal like this.
Yeah, or a player that's worth about an early to mid-second as well.
Yeah.
Like if they offered me a young receiver or something that I really liked as an early to mid-second. Like I love Josh Downs, for example. Like he's worth about a mid-second. I'd probably need slightly more than that to move off of Bo Nix. If somebody offered me 2 1s and Josh Downs for Bo Nix, I probably wouldn't take it. I would probably want more than that.
Well, let me ask you the inverse of this question, because obviously this isn't a rebuilder's mind. However, if somebody had Bo Nix and maybe their team's close to trying to compete, they're not quite there yet. Would you offer Bo Nix and get Geno Smith +2 first?
No, I would want
No.
a non-competitive asset.
Okay. No, I was just saying, like, no, like you're trying to compete. Maybe you're willing to sacrifice the age and then supplement 2 first-round picks. Like,
Yeah, I
that's what I
guess.
was
I mean,
asking.
I get the rationale behind
I'm
it,
just
but
throwing it out for everybody that's watching, by the way.
what we say all the time too, sometimes too, with the quarterback position, you kind of want an overpay when you're
Yeah.
selling a young quarterback like Bo Nix, who has a lot of market projectable value and will hold his value most likely for a good portion. Even if he has a down second year, I think he would still hold his
Yeah.
value as like a top 12 to 15 dynasty quarterback.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Again, if you guys have Bo Nix, hopefully you got a lot of value from that. Just kind of contextualize where he currently is at the market. We also have him in a tier with these. I mean, we mentioned CJ Stroud from a value perspective. The offensive line is work, but like you said, even if he's giving you 80% of the production that Bo Nix currently is, he's still going to be a valued commodity given the value accrual that you can see. A guy that peaked as the quarterback 3 on the market, which just simply isn't in the range of outcomes for Nix.
Yeah, exactly. And then with London, Hunter, and with Marvin Harrison, London is more competitive because he's very productive. And this just might go to show you that Drake London might be a little bit undervalued in your league market because he's only 23 and a half years old still and is projected a top 16 underdog pick right now. This is a dude that you could hold through a retool for sure. Like if you had to hold him for a year and a half or whatever, 2 years through the end of a rebuild, the guy's going to be 25 and a half years old, still heavily in the prime of his career. Presumably by then too, Michael Penix, if he hits from a real life standpoint, is probably going to be in the prime of his career. And these two guys could make magic for the next couple of years. I just tend to think that Drake London is a very undervalued dynasty asset in totality because he's just so good and so young.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. It was a guy that had almost 1,300 yards this past season. We saw the flashes, the upside in terms of the chemistry he had with Michael Penix, a guy that's going to be a second-round redraft pick at sub 24 years old. Yeah, I mean, if somebody wanted to make the case that he was in the 3 first-rounders tier, I would hear them out. I think he would probably be a slight mini tier behind that for me, like we said. But, I mean, at the end of the day, both him and Hunter, in my opinion, at the wide receiver position, feel like some of the easiest clicks, especially if you're getting at outside of the end of the second round, early into the third round for a lot of you guys.
Yeah, well, and me and you have had the conversation about London versus Nico Collins. And the reason I prefer London is because I think they actually have very similar projections from a short-term perspective, but Drake London is 2.5 years younger.
Yeah, and I think that's reasonable. The difference for me is I do think Nico Collins' projection is a good amount better for me because I think he has access to that 1,600-yard, 12 touchdown level ceiling if CJ Stroud can get back to the level we saw in year 1. And I also think for what it's worth, Nico Collins may very well be one of the 5 or 6 best real life talents in the league.
Right. And by the way, Nico's not in this video because he's in the 2021 NFL draft. But anyways, Travis Hunter, we've talked, we can skim through this very quickly. The reason he is here is because we think he's exceptionally talented and there's an 80 to 90% chance that all this wide receiver cornerback stuff ends up not mattering in the long term. He's going to end up being a PPR stud for Trevor Lawrence. As you can see, we have both Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter inside what our top 15 foundational rankings here.
Yeah, I've referenced this all the time, but people will always say, well, there's 2 wide receivers, like they're going to feed into each other. It's like, yeah, well, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were 2 top 10 point per game receivers last year. I've made the 2018 Pittsburgh Steelers example before. We've seen concentrated target shares in the NFL that have dominated in the past. And in fact, Liam Cohn was overseeing 2 of them. I mean, like, I guess technically speaking, Puka wasn't there when he was the OC for the Rams, but at that point still, was it Robert Woods or Brandon Cooks? I mean, he was on the staff when they had legitimate 3 guys competing for 1,000 yards.
Yeah. And I mean, Chase and Higgins last year were both top 5 receivers in fantasy points per game. Like it's very possible that, like you said, Thomas and Hunter are both just absolutely dominating this target share. The only thing that this hinges on is obviously Lawrence being a really good 35 plus 4,500 passing yard quarterback. Because if he's not that, then both of these guys will be more talent than they are production.
And the last point I'll make on the Hunter, people will hear, well, 2,900 yards, like that's a crazy number. Like no way they ever get there in their careers. It's like, okay, well, if you believe that, you better have Brenton Strange as a top 12 dynasty tight end.
Yeah, no kidding. Or you just hate Lawrence and you better have him dirt napped.
Yeah, he better be like quarterback 22 in your rankings if that's the case.
Yeah, for sure. And then Harrison, I do think, like you might think I'm nuts for this. I still think that a calendar year from now, we could be talking about Marvin Harrison as the dynasty wide receiver 1. overall.
I don't
I
think
still
you're
think he
not.
has that because of how great of a prospect he was. Obviously, the second year or the first year was not exactly what we expected. He had, 900 yards and 8 touchdowns or whatever. But the reception perception numbers just came out and they check out that he's a great route runner and, all that kind of stuff. I think that Harrison could still have a 1,400 yard, 12 touchdown season as a second year receiver. Like I still think it is very, very much in the range of outcomes for him.
It definitely is. Not to mention outside of him and Trey McBride, like I'll be really scared about the overall target situations. Like we mentioned, for example, with the Jacksonville Jaguars situation, it's a very concentrated target situation between those two wide receivers, like it is a very concentrated target situation between those two Cardinals with Marvin Harrison Jr. and with Trey McBride. If Kyler Murray, I mean, we talked about Kyler Murray a little bit on the last video that we did. You're a little bit more optimistic on Kyler than I am, just based on the fact that I'm a little bit concerned about the overall passing volume. And if he's not getting back to that level of rushing we saw earlier in his career, I'm a little bit hesitant there. But regardless, even if I'm a little bit more pessimistic on Kyler, the player himself, he's still very clearly, indisputably a top 15 quarterback in the league.
Yeah, and he's capable enough to get Marvin Harrison the ball. They just need to scheme him up a little bit better, which again is a risk with Harrison. I just feel like part of it was that he didn't play at his best. And when he's playing at his best, they'll move him around and they'll get opportunities to get him on the field. I think that's something that they're going to be looking and internally scouting a lot this year with how they use Harrison and how they could have used him better.
And you know what? I will officially make that switch. I did have Tet one spot higher, but you guys are hearing it on the clock right now. Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm moving up to 11, right behind Drake London at 10 and Travis Hunter at 9. So I'll give him his flowers there.
I understand not wanting Hunter over or not wanting Harrison over Hunter, but I do think you should have London over Hunter personally.
Yeah, that's more Hunter is close to that top 8 than anything.
Like, I think they're both like I said. London is both an elite redraft projection and an elite dynasty projection, which is really hard to say no to.
They are 22 and 23 for me in my rankings. Actually, if you remove the rookie picks, they would be 21 and 22 for me in my rankings. I have a Monter at 20. So, like, they're right there.
Yeah, they're close. And then Achane and Hampton, again, generally speaking, through a long-term rebuild, I don't want running backs on my roster because running backs, ACL test, like you said, Achane blows his ACL, he's probably going to lose a ton of value just because he's a running back. That's just how it works at the position. And because he's super productive right now too, tons of contenders would be interested in a player like this. However, he is like 23 years old. So you can hold him through a rebuild because he's young enough that he'll be 25 or whatever by the time you're ready to compete. It's just the problem is that he's a little bit undersized and he is hyper productive and he's a high redraft pick. So even though technically he would fit the bill because he's in the 2023 NFL draft, he is more so of 1 year retool running back, more so than long-term rebuild running back.
Yeah. Well, the way we describe it right now, if you had to ask me who I'm more confident in being a top 5 running back in fantasy this year, obviously it's Achane over Omarion Hampton. If you were to ask me, both tore their ACLs, who would be valued higher on the market, the answer is Omarion Hampton. So that's why how they kind of end up in the same tier, both at 4 and 5, tier 2 respectively for me. I have Devon Achane at 4, Omarion Hampton at 5, Saquon Barkley at 6. But if you want to rank Hampton at 4, I think that's reasonable. I wouldn't quite rank Barkley at 4 because of the age complex there, and obviously he's not in this video in general, but I do think that's a very clear tier of 3 with Achane, Hampton, and Barkley for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like you said, Barkley not in this video because he's older. He's not, a young player. But we can move into the next tier of foundational players, and we'll kind of go a little bit more rapid fire on those. So into the next tier of players, we have the 2 first rounders territory. Trey McBride, pretty straightforward, pretty cut and dry. He's like a 23-and-a-half-year-old tight end, like who is very, very productive. Like Trey McBride, sorry, he is not 23 and a half. Let me correct myself. He is 25 and a half, but tight ends, their primes are that 25 to 30-year-old area. And he was in the 2022 NFL draft. So he does meet this list because of that reason. Teteroa McMillan, young receiver. He is going to hold his value because he was a top 10 pick. The second we see this dude on the field producing, like I think one thing that people don't understand about a guy like Tet McMillan, who, yes, hasn't proven it in the NFL, but the reason he's a foundational asset is if Tet McMillan goes out there and has 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, the dude's going to be a top 5 dynasty receiver, like legitimately, because he was a top 10 pick, a really good prospect. We all kind of overthought him and stuff. That's why Tet McMillan is such a great asset to hold through a rebuild, especially if you guys just drafted him. For example, let's say you took over an orphan, you had the 104, you just drafted him. By year 3, year 4, if you're not ready to compete until Tet McMillan's year 3 to year 4, he's going to be really ready to compete for you.
Yeah. And I'll make the case with McBride because I actually would have McBride in the tier above. You're a little bit lower comparatively on McBride. I think him and Marv do have to be in the same tier at the very minimum because what we saw from McBride in terms of a target dominance perspective in 16 games as a tight end, I just mentioned how productive Bowers was. Top 4 all time in terms of targets in the season at 153 in 17 games. Trey McBride had 147 in 16 games. If he played that last game, got 7 targets, he would have out-targeted Brock Bowers last year. The fact is, too, we got a 6'4", 250-pound freak of an athlete tight end that has 5 career touchdowns in 2 years. I think that's bound to correct itself sooner rather than later with McBride specifically. McBride, if he went out there and he was, let's just say he had 111 catches, 1146, and 2 touchdowns last year. Let's just say Marv gets better, so maybe he doesn't reach 111 receptions, but I still feel confident in saying he'll be at about the 100 reception mark. If he goes 100 receptions, 1150 receiving yards, and he ups his touchdown total even from 2 to 6 to 8, like we're talking about a clear tight end 1 overall contender.
Yeah, no, he definitely could be. Like, I'm not going to like argue with you. The reason I have him a little bit lower is because I think Marvin will eventually take that step. And if McBride has exactly the same season again next year, he's probably not going to get any more valuable because he's going to be 26 and a half years old. It's not like with Bowers, he's 3.5 years younger than Trey McBride. You know what I mean? Like,
my argument is not he should be on the tier of Bowers. Don't get me wrong.
No, of course not. I'm just saying Marvin specifically is 23 years old right now, 22 and a half. What is he? 23 years old, 22.8 years old right now. Marvin Harrison has a monster season. He can climb further up the rankings than what Trey McBride can. But if you want to say bird in the hand is better than 2 in the bush, I know Trey McBride's an absolute beast. I'm going to rank him in the same tier as Harrison, and we'll see what happens in terms of target competition between those two guys. I can totally understand that. And it's because he's a tight end, he'll probably play longer than most receivers do.
Yeah, it's like realistically, I think both can happen very easily because when we look at the ancillary targets of the Cardinals last year, Michael Wilson had 71 targets. Greg Dortch had 50 targets. Elijah Higgins had 24 targets. Like, even when we go through, like, they threw the ball 523 times. If Marvin takes a step up, they'll also inherently throw the football more. And like I said, I just think if they're that dominant, if McBride and Harrison are that dominant as the 1-2 in this offense, Michael Wilson ain't getting 71 looks.
Yeah, no, we could see very, prime Chiefs, Tyreek and Kelsey get all the targets situation. We could see something like that for sure.
Yeah, again, obviously Kyler ain't Mahomes, but even if you're given, let's just say Kyler gets back to a 4,100 passing yard, 27 passing touchdowns, right? Like, even if he gets back to that level as a passer, which if Marvin Harrison takes a step up, it's more likely he will be at that level. Yeah, I see it. Again, I prefer McBride because of what we've seen, but if you told me Harrison was the one on this team, I also would not bat an eye. Yeah,
you would not. And Ladd McConkey and JSN, very easy projections. Why are you holding them through a rebuild? Because they're 23-year-old wide receivers who are very productive and both just had top 24 seasons and still probably have meat left on the bone to get better production-wise as well. But again, the reason you'd hold them through a rebuild is because, let's say you had to rebuild for 2 years, they're going to be in their prime still very comfortably 2 years from now if you had to rebuild them. So, I mean, I don't really have to say much else on Ladd McConkey and JSN. I feel like people know why you would hold them through a rebuild, no problem.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I mean, 23 or younger receivers that are that productive, sign me up. Or Ladd might actually be 24, but
no, they're both 23. They're 23.1 and 23.2 years old.
Which is funny because, like, if you were like Ladd is just like JSN with juice, except his offense won't throw the ball as much.
Yeah, and JSN is just an absolute PPR beast, so that's why you feel good about both of those guys. Into the next tier of players we have, and we can again kind of speed these up. We have Brock Purdy in the 2022 class, but he's a young quarterback. He's only 25 years old, so you can absolutely hold him through a rebuild. He hasn't gotten an extension yet, but he will before the season starts. I'm pretty confident by the time we get to training camp and whatnot, he's going to be extended on a Tua Tagovailoa plus caliber contract. That he's been kind of searching for. Whatever Jordan Love and Trevor Lawrence and Tua got, he's going to get plus maybe a 5% increase based on market value. And that's what we're going to be looking at with Brock Purdy. Pretty cut and dry there. He's got young weapons too with Ricky Pearsall. Ayuk is extended long-term. Kittle, obviously a little bit older, but he's going to be there for the next couple of years. They just extended him. Juwan Jennings, we'll see what happens. I feel pretty confident in Brock Purdy. The running backs, should we group together Bucky Irving, Trevion Henderson, and Breece Hall? I guess Breece might be a separate discussion, but Bucky Irving and Trevion Henderson specifically, both young running backs. The one concern you'd have for Irving is that he was a day 3 pick. Let me ask you this. If you knew you were undergoing a 2-year rebuild, like by 2027, you're going to start to compete, would you want to hold Bucky Irving or would you want to sell Bucky Irving?
If I'm rebuilding?
Yeah.
If I'm rebuilding, he's a sell easily.
Okay, so expand on that because Bucky Irving is, how old is Bucky Irving? He is 22.7 years old. So the average fantasy player might say, why would you sell a 22-year-old running back?
Because his market value right now, after a 5.4 yards per carry, very, very explosive end to the season, is at a very high. And yeah, he could end up being a top 5 dynasty running back, but I also point to the fact that right now he's valued above guys like Trevion Henderson, like Chase Brown, like Quinshon Judkins. I mean, Chase Brown is a couple years older, but if Chase Brown's like the RB2 in fantasy next year, there's not a possibility he gets extended by the Bengals. I can see that being in the range of outcomes. Basically, what I'm pointing with Bucky Irving right now is that right now he is the RB7 on the market, and I think it is as likely he stays at that value or slightly goes down, or sorry, more likely that happens than he gains value is basically what I'm pointing out.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if we saw Bucky and, let's say Achane switch places where, Bucky Irving is kind of valued in the same realm of where Devon Achane is valued now this time next year, because Bucky Irving has RB6 in fantasy point per game type of season. And maybe he's not quite as efficient as his rookie season, which we saw from Achane coming into his second season, but he builds upon that production, maybe gets a bigger workload and still has a great season.
Yeah, and I guess maybe the other part too is like we already see the market really likes Bucky. He's the RB7, like I said. Yeah, there's a possibility he can rise to the RB5 maybe overall, but like I said, if the other running backs after him do also show up, like if Quinshon Judkins is the RB12 in fantasy next year, he's going to be higher than Irving, even if Irving outproduces him. So baking that in, baking his current market value, and baking the fact too that there is still risk. Like I understand you are higher on Grizzard than maybe I am. I am having a little bit of pause going from Cone just to see how consistent the offense will be, specifically in the run game. I think you guys are going to be able to throw the football. I mean, Baker Mayfield's going to be able to play well. You guys are going to be able to protect up front. Obviously, you guys have the receiving core, arguably one of the best receiving cores in the league. Like, don't get me started. Like, you guys will be able to throw the football. I just think what Cone did to revitalize that run game is where I have the most pause.
That is the absolute correct take. The biggest loser of Liam Cohen leaving is Bucky Irving, 100%. Yeah. It is unequivocally Bucky Irving. He also was a 4th-round pick.
Yep.
And, what happened? Rashad White's a free agent next year. What happens if we draft a 3rd-round running back? Is that affecting Bucky Irving's value? Like, I would not be shocked if he has almost the identical career trajectory to Kyren Williams, where he has another great season this year, but then we draft a 3rd-round running back and that affects his value and all this kind of stuff. So I would say Bucky Irving, I would feel more towards leaning on the side of, hey, if I can get somebody's going to offer me the 107 this year and I can take Trevion Henderson or Judkins, plus I get a future early projected 2nd next year to move off of Bucky Irving and I was in a long-term rebuild, I would definitely consider re-rolling in that situation. He is an interesting topic of conversation though, because it also wouldn't shock me. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have not been good at drafting the running back position. It would not shock me if they go, we hit on Bucky and we're going to ride him until the sunset for the next 2 to 3 years. Maybe they even draft or re-sign him after his rookie contract is done. They view him, I can tell you as somebody who follows the team very closely, as a future superstar. They do not view him as, hey, we got lucky and hit on a day 3 running back. They view him as one of the biggest building blocks of this team's offense. They view him that way. And also too, the one thing that Liam Cohen did not bring with him is Tristan Wirfs, Luke Gadecki, Graham Barton, Cody Mauch. Like, we have, in my opinion, the best offensive line in football.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely up there, especially too. I know your offensive line coach was getting some buzz for an offensive coordinator candidate.
We blocked the Jaguars from hiring him as the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, so I think the makings are there. It's just more so of a risk management perspective, knowing what his current market value is. I'm not going to go out there and say, yeah, he's not going to be productive this year. That's not my question. I just think there's enough risk right now with his current market value that if you don't need the production value of what he's going to give you in 2025 as a rebuilder, which inherently, in fact, it's more beneficial if you don't have that production on your team, I would look to send. Like, again, we have mid first rounder plus listed here. I could see a lot of leagues feeling comfortable people sending you 2-1s for Bucky Irving.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you guys notice, you might have noticed this already. 2027, early to mid first. So we're talking Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams, potentially Arch Manning if he doesn't come out this year.
Yep.
That's the territory we're talking about, selling a projected early 2027 first. These players in this territory, we would sell. And we also have, Jeremiah Love on the picture there for the 26 class. If you wanted to say, okay, whatever quarterback one is of next year's class, maybe it's Garrett Nussmeier, whatever, Lenora Seller, somebody like that. And then you also have Jeremiah Love, who projects to be the RB1 next year. Whoever wide receiver one ends up emerging as, we don't know yet. Maybe it's a Carnell Tate. Maybe it's we don't exactly know. This is where we value those early projected first, because as a rebuilder, you should be wanting to buy these types of picks.
And contextualize it like this too, right? We have one mid-first rounder plus here, just because if you guys see the 2027 and 2026 picks are in here, it says early to mid. So if it's mid, it would be equal to a mid-first rounder, because we're literally talking in the context of future picks. If it ends up on the earlier side, that's why we give the benefit of the doubt to that plus. So it makes sense to your equating. What would Bucky Irving's market value be right now? Okay, it'd be around Travion Henderson. It'd be around Cam Ward, which is the 105, 106 this year, which would be around the early to mid projected first for the next 2 years. So think of it like that in relation to the left side column. When you see these picks in here, it is in relation to those future picks, not just this year's class.
Yes, absolutely. And again, some of the guys here, Henderson, he's a young running back. It's understandable why he would be here. Cam Ward, young quarterback, understandable why he would be here. He can gain value. If you're in a rebuild, you should have absolutely zero problems holding Cam Ward for the next 2 years, because he's a very young quarterback. Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, we probably should explain ourselves on a little bit, because both of them were from the 2022 NFL draft. So they are actually at the higher end as far as like they're a little bit older than the rest of these guys. But Garrett Wilson's a receiver. I'm not really worried. I know Garrett Wilson's good. He had the quietest 100 reception season that I've ever seen. Like 100 receptions is hard to do, man. The fact that Garrett Wilson had 100 catches this year and nobody seems to care means that he is probably going to be undervalued in both redraft and dynasty formats.
Be honest, when you had him, though, it felt more like 79, eh?
It did, yeah, because he averaged very poor efficiency on said receptions, and he probably left 20 receptions on the field.
For what it's worth, he finishes the wide receiver 10 in PPR, and if you asked 10 people to give a blind guess where he finished, they would be at wide receiver 18, wide receiver 21. Like, it didn't feel like he finished as the wide receiver 10, and obviously total points. Like, if you take the points per game, I'm sure that's probably about where he was, but just it is funny seeing him at number 10 on a even if it's just a total point perspective.
Dude, he outscored Jackson Smith-Njigba. And Jackson Smith, he did not outscore Jackson Smith-Njigba. He was one spot. It was 14.9 PPR points per game for Jackson Smith-Njigba, 14.8 for Garrett Wilson. So he was essentially the same value-wise as Jackson Smith-Njigba, because JSN had a couple of monster games and he was a little bit more consistent, especially towards the end of the season. He was a little bit better because Adams kind of took over in that Jets receiving core. But it's funny to me that people are, maybe selling Garrett Wilson. I would still be comfortable holding him through a rebuild, like I just said.
It's funny you mentioned that. I'm not sure. Did you look at the stats, or did you just see the point per game?
Just the points per game.
Okay, so one of those receivers had 100 receptions, 1,130 receiving yards, and 6 receiving touchdowns. The other receiver had 101 receptions, 1,104 receiving yards, and 7 receiving touchdowns.
So they had essentially the exact same yardage and touchdown total, except Garrett Wilson scored one more touchdown, and I guess JSN had a little bit more receiving yards.
Yep, pretty much. Yeah. JSN had 26 more receiving yards, and he had 1 less reception and 1 less touchdown.
How did Garrett Wilson not outscore him then?
2-point conversions, probably.
Yeah, it must have been that. It must have been 2-point conversions or something, or maybe rushing yards, I guess.
Yeah, that's actually so. Yeah, you get the 6, and then you get. Technically speaking, yeah, he should have outscored him by like 8. Yeah.
He had a better receiving season, whether it was 2-point conversions or throwing. I think JSN threw a touchdown, didn't he?
Oh, maybe that happened. And maybe comment down below if you guys know exactly how JSN outscored Garrett Wilson, but it is hilarious. They're both 6 foot 183 versus 6 foot 197. Obviously, JSN a little stockier. Garrett Wilson is going to run faster, obviously. Like, it is pretty funny.
Same exact projections, like basically. Sorry, it's insane. It's insane how crazy the market ends up working out there. And we do need to move this along because I don't want to stick people around too long here. Breece Hall, also very simple. He's been elite as a prospect, elite as a rookie, elite as a second-year running back, was not elite last year. I tweeted this and a bunch of people commented on it. It's like last year relative to the rest of Breece Hall's college and NFL playing career was a down season. But I think given, as we talked about already, Justin Fields, not Aaron Rodgers, the personality. I think Breece Hall was either injured, which a couple of fantasy docs pointed out to me that he was dealing with stuff, hyperextended his knee, all this kind of stuff. Same knee that he had the ACL tear on. He was probably a little bit banged up, more than people would be willing to believe last year. And I think mentally he was kind of dejected from the Aaron Rodgers Jets situation. They fired their coach in week 5. That turned the locker room off pretty quickly. I think both Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall both experienced that. But that being said, even though Breece Hall is technically under 24 years old right now and was drafted in the 2022 season, if I was a long-term rebuilder, I would not hold him. I would only hold him in a one-year kind of retool. I would not hold Breece Hall in a long-term rebuild. He is the type of running back that is still valued pretty highly on the market, is a little bit more of a risky asset. You probably should sell him off for draft capital if it was on the table for you.
Yeah, so Breece Hall last year, again, down in terms of his overall production, don't get me wrong. Like, we expected more from him. But through the first 11 weeks of last year, he was the RB11 in points per game, and he was only 0.2 behind James Cook, 0.3 behind Kyron Williams, 0.3. Obviously, Devon Achane had the stint without Tua, so I'm not really going to use that. Whatever, that's fine. 1.5 behind Jahmyr Gibbs. So it's like, yeah, he wasn't on the level of those guys, and I'm sure if you drafted him in the first round of your redraft league, and yes, I'm referring to myself when I'm saying that, it felt like it was worse because we expected him to be in contention for RB1, but he was still an RB1 in totality. Like, he was a top 12 level running back before the injuries piled up. Because week 12 was when he first got added to the injury report. If I remember, it was through the bye week.
He had a couple big games. He was just inconsistent anybody who rostered Breece Hall last year knows that the Jets should have just been better than they were. Like, it was clearly a locker room quarterback issue that everybody was at odds about.
Yeah. And like, when we just take specifically games where he had 15 plus fantasy points, like he had games with 25, 23, 27, 31, like against the Colts. If you remember that game as well, scored 2 touchdowns, 7 receptions out of the backfield. Like, on top of that, he also has a path to be the number 2 receiving weapon on his team. Sure, we could be concerned about the overall passing volume for Justin Fields, but outside of Garrett Wilson, I mean, Allen Lazard's not coming back. I mean, are we really expecting Mason Taylor to be a number 2 overall target in year 1? Or are we going to expect the running back that in the last 2 years has 100 am I counting this right? 171 targets in the last 2 years?
Yeah, dude, he's been peppered. And people are going to say, well, Justin Fields doesn't throw to his running backs. It's like, well, if he has no one else to throw to, he will.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, oh, he'll take off and run. It's like, yeah, cool. What happens when he can't take off and run? Who's he going to throw the ball to?
I think everybody just takes mobile quarterback, not going to throw to his running backs. It's like, well, when he's the second best receiver on the team, you will.
Exactly. I think that's pretty much the simple case of it. Breece Hall's a talented player. Breece Hall, when he's healthy, has explosive ability. Breece Hall, when he's healthy, has over 170 targets in the last 2 years in 33 games.
For sure. So we need to rapid fire these last couple.
Yeah.
Chase Brown is 25. So I would say probably not the type of running back you would want to hold through a 2 to 3 year rebuild. But again, 1 year retool, I would be okay holding Chase Brown through that time. But I will say, of every single person we've talked about so far, he is the one guy where I go, I would be looking for a selling window midseason, probably, because he's going to produce. And we know that. And if you're a rebuilding team, you probably want that production off of your roster. And because he's 25 and needs a contract extension probably after this year, you would probably want to get rid of him in that situation, even if you were a 1 year retool, and especially if you're a multi-year rebuild.
Yeah, and vice versa with Emeka Egbuka. I think he's the type of guy that if you don't have him on your roster right now, he's the perfect guy to look at midseason. Because guess what? If he's only getting wide receiver 3, 4th target level looks early on, maybe he's getting acclimated to the offense. Maybe you guys aren't putting too much on his plate right away, which you don't need to, because quite frankly, if he's not fully ready with J1, which for the record, we both expect him to be, but even if he wasn't, Jalen McMillan can play the third receiver role right away. And if that was a scenario that happened, I don't think it's any indictment on the talent of Egbuka. It would be more so, hey, we got 3 receivers that are already ready right now. Why don't we give this guy more time? Again, that's to say the scenario where it didn't work out, where you have a buying window in season. If that window does open up, we still think this guy was a clear top 20 level talent in this class. Goes to a perfect situation. We already mentioned that the fact that we have no real concerns for the passing attack specifically of the Bucs, and his equatable cost might very well go down. In fact, I've seen in some rookie drafts, we have valued at the 107. He slipped to the 110. He slipped to the 111. I saw in one draft, he slipped to the 202. Like, it happens at some time. I know your eyes are glancing. Like, I've had people reach out to me, hey, Egbuka's still here at the 202. Should I trade up? absolutely fucking yes, you should trade up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like people assume that he's going to have a Romo Odunze, JSN, CD Lamb caliber rookie season, and they might be correct. And you might have a buying window mid-season on Emeka Egbuka, but he also might just be that good and immediately win out the third wide receiver job and maybe even outproduce one of the top 2 guys on the Bucs, just given how they run their offense. They like these separator types. Baker will not discriminate if Egbuka's the one open every single time. He will throw him the football. So I do think Egbuka is the perfect guy for a rebuild because, yes, you're probably getting better production out of Egbuka year 2, year 3, year 4 of his career than you are getting out of year 1. Sam LaPorta, I mean, he's 24 years old and he had a top 5 tight end season as a rookie. That's why he's here. Bryce Young, I talked about him ad nauseum in the last video. He had a monster.
Same with McCarthy. We could skip those guys.
Yeah. Both of those guys we talked about already. Both of them are young quarterbacks. We both believe in the talent. Quinshon Judkins, again, year 1 probably will produce, but he is a 22-year-old running back and he is going to hold his value and he is probably going to become a top 10 dynasty running back as soon as his second season.
He's rocking 10, right? Isn't he rocking 10 right now?
Yeah, which is a sick number for a running back. By the way. Like Nick Singleton, who we'll talk about in next year's class, the number 10 drip on a running back, it looks good. It looks like old school shit with like a 1950s baller ass running back.
Dude, when Isaiah Pacheco was an ass, we thought he was the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, no, he had drip on his jersey for sure. So I like that Judkins is rocking 10 for sure. But either way, you'd hold him through a rebuild. You probably just spent the 108 on him or something. Xavier Worthy and Jordan Addison are both young receivers. Again, Addison 23, Worthy 22. Easy discussion for why you'd be holding those two guys through a rebuild.
Addison a little more proven at this point. I would say Worthy has the higher ceiling just inherently. Hey, guess what? If JJ McCarthy can become Patrick Mahomes, maybe Addison has the higher ceiling, but the likelihood of that happening is 0.00001% chance of happening, even if I'm the biggest optimist of JJ McCarthy.
Not to mention Patrick Mahomes doesn't have a Justin Jefferson in his offense already. Exactly. And Xavier Worthy could become the next, I don't want to say Tyreek Hill, but he could become the next number 1 receiver for Patrick Mahomes. We don't know who's better between Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy at this point in time. We haven't seen them at their best playing on the field at the same time.
Yeah, like even if he becomes a better version of what like peak Marquise Brown was, like if that's giving you 1,200 yards attached to the best quarterback in the world, that again, I am a little bit more pessimistic on him reaching 40 touchdown level upside like he's shown. But to say that's not a possibility would just be completely overlooking the fact that this guy's already an outlier.
Yeah, and not to mention, if you're in a rebuild and you have let's say you have Puka, Brian Thomas, Xavier Worthy, great receiver core to have in a rebuild. You know what I mean? Like you're going to be building around those guys, continuing to add players in future rookie classes and so on. And again, the next tier down, we have Rashee Rice, Romo Odunze, Zay Flowers, Michael Penix, and then 3 rookies from this year in Colston Loveland, Matthew Golden, and Tyler Warren. Again, with all
Rice
of these
is the
guys,
biggest difference for us.
Yeah, Rice is the biggest difference. You have him higher than I do. I have Flowers quite a bit higher than you have.
That's the other one.
Both of these guys are young receivers that, yes, I would say Rashee Rice definitely has the higher ceiling. He definitely could be this time mid-season, this time next year, a top 12 dynasty receiver because we saw him producing at a super, super high level with Patrick Mahomes, getting all the PPR targets he can handle. Whereas with Zay Flowers, you have pass volume concerns with the Lamar Jackson offense. Hasn't quite shown that elite level play that Rashee Rice had shown when he was on the field healthy. But at the same time, I feel very comfortable that, like I just said, if you had a receiver core in a rebuild, Puka Nacua, Brian Thomas Jr., Rashee Rice, or Zay Flowers, you'd feel great about that receiver core for the long term.
Yeah, we just got to hope that Mahomes doesn't dolphin dive into his knee again. For that matter.
Yes, that was not a wise decision on Patrick Mahomes' part. And Odunze is a very difficult one to figure out. I think the conventional wisdom is that he's on the downslope right now because they just drafted Luther Burden and Colston Loveland. They already have DJ Moore. And Odunze had a good rookie season, but I wouldn't say it was great. I wouldn't say it was excellent, but I also wouldn't say it was bad either. It wouldn't shock me if Odunze had a major leap this year and overtook everybody in that receiving core. But it also wouldn't shock me if this time next year, we still think the same of Odunze, which is like, he's a good receiver. He had a nice second year, a nice ascension as a player, but he's not a superstar receiver either.
See, this is my biggest conflict right now with my rankings is how to measure between Burden and Odunze. Like obviously you have Burden a lot lower, so that's not a conversation for you. I feel confident in saying one of them is going to be a huge value gain after the season because, like I said, I'm not as believing in terms of DJ Moore. I don't know. Maybe it's the attitude there. I don't know. Maybe he gets traded. There's just too many negative vibes for me right now with DJ Moore. And as much as I love Colston Loveland, he's not going to be the number 1 target earner in year 1. So really what it comes back to me is which one of Burden and Odunze is going to explode based off my my thoughts on the Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams offense. I don't know.
This is what I think is going to happen. I think that DJ Moore is going to be there this year, maybe get dealt at the deadline, maybe get dealt next offseason. DJ Moore and Burden cannot exist separately from each other. So if DJ Moore is there, Burden is going to have a down rookie season. If DJ Moore gets dealt mid-season, before the season, whatever, then Burden's going to take that step forward. But Odunze is the one that's kind of independent of the two of them. So he actually could be the guy that takes the step forward in spite of whatever DJ Moore, Colson, Loveland, and Burden are doing.
Yeah, for what it's worth, again, I do have Burden one spot higher just because I love the skill set to potentially.
You have him higher than Odunze?
I do. I have him one spot higher. I love the skill set to potentially play that slot role in the long term for Ben Johnson. I've heard everything I needed to hear. And on top of that, they were very comparable for me as prospect in terms of grade. I had an 88.0 on Odunze. I had an 86.5 on Burden. So, I mean, it was close to begin with, and you don't have the stink of a mediocre rookie season on Burden right now. So that's my thoughts there. However, I mean, like you said, the season as a whole, if you just look at 750 receiving yards, whatever we had, down year. But the reception perception was actually pretty fucking good. 71st percentile against man, 87th percentile against press. Sure, he's not a great zone beater at this point. Only 52nd percentile against zone. But for his worst number to be as a zone receiver when he's an X wide receiver that needs to beat man-to-man, like for comparison, pull up his man and press versus even BTJ, and we know how impressive BTJ was.
Yeah, no, his man and press were just as good as Neighbors and BTJ for the most part. Yeah. So this is why I think it's personally an incorrect ranking to have Burden ahead of him, because he was a top 10 pick and Burden was a second round pick, even though you
not by the staff though. Not by the staff.
No, he wasn't. But I would venture a guess to say that he's also, again, this is a human element of it. We heard that Burden had some like work ethic, attitude concerns, and Odunze had the opposite reports coming out. He was the glowing, everybody loves him, personality. So for me, I would value Odunze even with the stink of a mediocre rookie season under him.
Hey, they're back to back. That's reasonable to me. If you prefer Odunze, I think that's fine. It's just given my evaluation on Burden. Again, it's funny. He's not even on this video, but we will obviously have to talk about him a little bit here because people are going to have that question since Odunze is here. I just really like the fit with Ben Johnson. And you mentioned the character concerns. None of those have come out of the Bears camp. In fact, everything we've heard about from the Bears perspective on Burden has just been glowing.
Yeah. Yeah. And Loveland, we can kind of group into this conversation too. He's a young tight end. I mean, all of these guys, Loveland, Golden, and Warren, we've talked about ad nauseum in rookie videos. So we don't even need to mention them. They're good rebuilding targets because they're rookies. That's why they would be good rebuilding targets. And then Michael Penix is the last guy in this tier that we should probably mention quickly. 25-year-old quarterback, going to be the first year as a starter this year. I very much believe that Drake London could be on a superstar caliber ascension. Like this might sound outlandish to some people who are maybe more casual football fans. If Drake London had 1,700 receiving yards and 13 touchdowns this year, I wouldn't be shocked, man. I think he's that good. And Penix has him as his number one receiver. Darnell Mooney, one of the more criminally underrated receivers around the league. Maybe Kyle Pitts does something. Bijan's going to be really great out of the backfield as a receiver too. Penix does have quite a nice infrastructure with Zach Robinson calling the plays, good offensive line, steady coaching staff. I think Penix, he's a guy that I'm starting to get a little bit higher on.
I'll have a counter for that in a second. Did you see the report that Zach Robinson expects a Kyle Pitts breakout this year?
I mean,
we hear that report every year. It was funny because we were talking about Pitts a couple weeks ago, and then there was just a Robinson report like, I expect Kyle Pitts to take a huge step up in the offense this year. It's like, okay, why didn't that happen last year? But all jokes aside,
Pitts is a fool me once, shame on you. Fool me 3 times, can't get fooled again. But he's also the gambler meme where we're all digging for the gold. And if we finally give up right before Kyle Pitts does have the season we're all thinking of, Kyle Pitts, dude, is like a year older than Tyler Warren. He's so young still. It's insane.
Hey, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, can't put the blame on you. Fool me 3 times, fuck the peace sign.
Yeah, that's exactly.
You know where that's from?
That's Kendrick Lamar, right?
Close.
No, J. Cole. J. Cole.
Yeah, no role models.
One of those rappers that everybody glazes for their lyrics is the accurate guess.
I will quickly make my point on Penix, then we can wrap this up because we are going long. The reason why I can't have Penix a tier above, he only had 11 rushing yards on 7 rushing carries. And it's like people were so excited. They said, oh my God, he's a 4.4 level speed quarterback in the 40. It's like, well, if he's not running the football in game, it doesn't fucking matter, first and foremost. And second of all, like, he was fine, but I mean, are we really applauding, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, a 60% completion or 58% completion percentage, whatever it was? Like,
Yeah,
he's
again,
fine.
I'm not going to say that Michael Penix is like a dude already. I'm saying that he has a lot of positive things going for him
Yeah.
in his situation. That's basically all I would say. If you were a rebuilding team, you probably spent the 204 on Penix last year, and it's worth holding him through a rebuild, in my opinion.
I just hope people are realizing that for him to be a quarterback one in points per game, which if people are pro Penix, that has to be the expectation
Yeah,
that he can
he's
reach
got to
a
be
quarterback.
CJ Stroud.
I was going to say like at worst, he needs to be Jared Goff.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, because like Purdy and Burrow and those guys, they run more than
they
him,
run.
So.
Yeah. Even Dak runs more when he's healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Baker runs more. Like there's guys that run a lot more than him. So the guys that just missed the cut, we can quickly rattle these off and then we will be out of here. I would have had Chris Olave on this list just because even despite the concussion concerns, he's still a very young receiver, has a very high target share. We have no idea what's going to happen with the Saints situation. As of now, Tyler Shuck is slated the starter, and Chris Olave is probably not going to have a great season, but I could still see the underlying metrics being solid. And for him, just stay healthy, man. Just stay on the field, and we'd feel really good about that. So he'd be the one guy that I would say would need to be on the list if I were making it as a foundational asset. But I get the risk, the concussions, and all that kind of stuff. Anybody that you had that just missed the cut.
Yeah, so you're talking about Olave, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so with Olave, yeah, you kind of made the case. Offensive projection isn't really there right now. Obviously, the concussions are worrying me. 4 concussions, I believe, in the last 3 years is the number. You guys can correct me in the comments if that is off. The guys I slightly missed out for me, again, Kyron Williams technically fits into this, and he would be just close off of this. It's just I kind of just
he's a rebuilder. He's not a rebuilder running back. And same with Kenneth Walker. Even both of them were in the 2022 class. They're not rebuilding running backs. They're contending short-term window guys.
Yeah, and the obvious one for me would be Bird, and I actually would have him quite like in the middle of that mid to late first rounder tier, just based off my analysis of him. And he's a guy that I have valued in the late first of this class, so that would be there. And the other guy I'll just mention, he wouldn't make this list, but he is like semi close to being off. George Pickens, I think for the most part, he's worth about a 110 to 202 on the market right now, depending on what you can get. And there is an upside case scenario where if he does become the clear number 2 concentrated receiver for Dallas, he could have the best season of his career. So
yeah, and I'll mention my guy Josh Downs as like in that Pickens range. He wouldn't be necessarily the first name off of this list, but he would be a little bit further down in terms of a late first round, early second round caliber asset. But anyways, we went through in-depth foundational rankings. If you guys want all of our rankings, you can actually go on our site and tune the age slider so that you can see only rankings of ours under the age of 24 or under the age of 27 or whatever the case is. For, let's say you're in a dynasty contending situation, you only want 27-year-old players or younger, you can definitely go in that situation and do that on the site. Head on over to the link in the pinned comment, flockfantasy.com, promo code FSE for all of our dynasty rankings. We will be doing this for the contending assets in the next video, so definitely stay tuned for that. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.